just received.
What's up, Brave Nation? We're back here for another episode of Hawk's Corner with the OG of mixed martial art, Carrick, Phil, the Joker Campbell. That's a new nickname.
Works for me.
And the one and only, the Roaring Lion, Carlos Kramer. All right, guys, we are very consistent with Hawk's Corner. It's been only 1 year since we've done the last one. How's things? What's been going on? There's a lot of things that's happened since the last time. What's happening with you guys?
There has been just exponential growth and interest in what we've been doing, especially for me back home in Ireland. Now there has been so much more momentum and people realizing what Brave Combat Federation is. And for me, it's so gratifying to be able to almost be a representative for Brave back home and let people know just how incredible Brave Combat Federation is and how we go from strength to strength, putting fighters first. So I've been really enjoying taking on that kind of ambassador style role back home. It's been a lot of fun.
And you also had your bare knuckle fight?
I did indeed. I made my bare knuckle boxing debut. That was a lot of fun. It turns out bare knuckle boxing is terrible for your hands.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Would you do that again?
100%. Yeah. That's something. It's something I want to pursue a little bit more. And also, I always feel if you are involved in mixed martial arts or combat sports as a commentator, as an analyst, you need to have lived it. You need to have been in there. You need to be able to empathize with the athletes. Because if I'm sitting calling a fight and I'm being critical of a fighter, and I've never been in such a position, the authenticity is lacking. And MMA fans, for me, are some of, I don't know whether you agree, gentlemen, are some of the smartest sporting fans in the world because of how complex our sport is. And so they can feel authenticity or something that's inauthentic straight away. So I enjoy that component as well.
Just a question I've always been thinking about it, but when I used to fight, we didn't have bare knuckle fighting at that time. Maybe there was, but we didn't know. We were just so focused on MMA and being a professional MMA fighter. But did you train in your sparring for leading up to the fight? Were you training without gloves or with gloves?
Oh, training with gloves, training with MMA fighting gloves.
Well, they always say that you have a reach issue because that little inch that makes a difference, right?
Exactly. When I was doing a little bit of pad work, I was doing work on the paddles to save my hands, and I was doing it with bare knuckle, but I was using pro MMA gloves when I was sparring. And people say, oh, you can't spar in pro MMA gloves, you're going to hit too heavy. In bare knuckle, you can't hit heavy because you will damage your hand. So it really is, your style has to be almost like one of the Diaz brothers. 60% find your range, and maybe the last of a combination, put one big shot on. So there was so many different variables. People think bare knuckle, it's just boxing, but there's so much nuance to it, and I think that's what I really enjoyed about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that people don't realize is that the old saying that gloves is made to protect your hand, you know, and I also think that you'll pay a little bit more extra attention towards when you're punching someone, that sometimes in MMA we forget about it and we swing the hand and punch the guy, we don't care where it hits, but in bare knuckle you're so worried about hitting the forehead and you always want to catch the chin. Yeah,
your shot selection has to be on point. It's not just a case of throw 3 or 4 and hope one of them lands. You have to be, and that's sometimes why you see that's more of a single shot type of combat sport, trying to find that range, trying to find the chin. You can't just go in and throw crazy, but I love the dynamic of it, and I like trying to figure out that kind of puzzle.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. No, looking forward to attending one of your bare knuckle fights, and really that's amazing too. It was really inspiring for me to, after I think 60, 70 kgs I've gained since the last time I fought. When I saw you fighting, I was like, I need to get back and do some training back again, Who knows? Might still have time to get a fight in.
Comeback could be on.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. What are you guys' thoughts about the fight in the title fight between Tae-Kyun Kim and Roman Bogatov?
Michael Tyson's great trainer, Customato, said a quote that I can't quite do verbatim, but he said, most fights are believed by the audience to be a test of skills, but they're not. It's a test of wills. Customato said, skills are usually if the matchmaker is great, and we've got a great matchmaker. The skills are usually pretty even. They can balance each other out, and it just comes down to will. And we saw which fighter had the greatest will, and it was the fighter from Russia. And it was one of the great expressions of will I have ever seen, not in Brave Combat Federation, not in mixed martial arts, not in sports, but ever.
No, that's a big statement. Yeah, you just scored Roman to win that fight?
I did, but barely. It was a really amazing fight, and you talk about two guys that are just so tough. I mean, you knew with 3 of their 4 fights from the 2021 were nominated for Fight of the Year. Yeah. You knew when these two collided, it was going to be extra special. Tae-Kyun Kim will be back stronger than ever. He had a year layoff, and he was a little rusty, admittedly, per him. So I can't wait to see him back in the cage. And Roman Bogotov, I mean, you talk about resilient, you talk about tough, you talk about literally a wet blanket on you an entire fight, and that's what he was. And big props to him.
No, definitely. No, it was a crazy fight. I mean, 5 rounds. I don't know, like jump in, guys. I mean, I felt like there was one time you see and you're like, he could have got out of that takedown several times. But then on the other hand, how good is that grip on the ankle grip that he had that he just couldn't?
It was relentless.
Yeah.
It was relentless from the get-go. At the start of the 3rd round, Bogotov came out with his hands on his knees. And I thought to myself, he's done. Yeah. This is it. He's going to
start slowing down.
He's going to slow down. He's going to get finished in this round. But it's almost like he reverted to his factory settings. Yeah. Grab that leg. Get the single. By all means necessary. And to do that against Tae-Kyun Kim, I don't think perhaps enough people realize just what an accomplishment that is. Yeah. Tae-Kyun Kim was coming into this fight 9-0, undefeated. A lot of people thought he was going to walk through Bogotov. Right. A lot of people mistakenly thought that this was going to be a shutout. But Bogotov showed insurmountable heart. And what happens, as you say, Kirik, when you strip away those elements, of the technicality of a fight, what it comes down to quite simply is who wants it more.
So it was a split decision. So if these guys go back to the drawing boards, they're going back to the gyms, they're thinking about they're watching the fights again, and they come back, it was a split decision. In any case, it could have gone either ways. But what should be Tae-Kyun Kim doing to come back and get that decision on his side?
I think I can jump in on that one. Arguably the greatest boxer in history is Jack Dempsey. And Jack Dempsey said to one of his biographers, tell the people, tell everybody, tell the world, everything I know, I learned from the losses. I didn't learn it from a coach. I didn't learn it from the wins. I didn't learn it coming up doing bare knuckle boxing in the mining camps of Montana. I learned it from the losses. I don't believe Tae-Kyun Kim needs to focus on anything. I think that loss was a huge lesson, and it's going to inform every single aspect of his training going forward. I don't want to see it overconfidence, but I think he now understands the importance of will and of confidence, because I believe he lost his confidence in the championship rounds. Those takedowns, I think he just thought, Roman Bogotov is just going to take me down. So why should I fight my hardest? Because he's just going to take me down. I think if he fought harder, he could have stayed standing. Looking at it from the outside, I think there's things he could have done, but I think he broke mentally, and I think that's the very last time we ever see Aries Kim break mentally.
But on the other hand, how many times did he stuff the takedowns? You know, I mean, he was trying, maybe.
He did. I mean, and I've got to add to that, gentlemen, because I talked to Tae-Kyun Kim today, and I said, you know, brother, you're going to be back, all that, you know, stronger than ever. And he said, I did all this without a coach. I don't have a coach. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, think of the discipline and the structure of him to go all this way in the last year, really not to have a coach. I mean, it's incredible to think with the proper training, with the proper coach, what he's going to do.
I mean, the levels of skills, 100%, they both are the top. But that's what coaching does, right? It's that little strategy and that little understanding about what's going to happen. And it's more
cerebral.
Yeah, and that's what we saw in with Brad Katona.
Yeah.
That's strategy.
The mastermind John Kavanaugh. And you know, Hawk, of anybody, the importance, because you've fought without a coach for a long time. And you can go only so far, right? Until you need that. You need that structure.
100%.
I actually have a message right here directly for Tai Kyun Kim. I got 3 letters and 3 letters, KHK MMA. I'm dead serious, 100% serious.
Yeah.
I know the place you want to be, KHK MMA Bahrain.
Could you imagine if he had 3, 4, 5, 6 months working with Eldar?
No one will take him down. No one.
That would be incredible. Because he's already a striking phenom. I think his boxing is top tier.
Yeah.
If you couple that now with offensive wrestling, defensive wrestling, if he took a little bit of time away and worked diligently on that, he could potentially come back. And it being a split decision, you have the scope there for the rematch. You can make a compelling argument for Tai Kyun Kim having won that fight. Personally, I scored it for Bogatov. I think it was 2, 3, and 5. I scored for Bogatov.
3-2,
But you can make a compelling argument for Tai Kyun Kim.
Sure.
And if he spent a little bit of time at KHK, he could be a phenom.
Incredible guy too. I mean, fighting for his mother that came from a tough background and home and all that, for what he's done, with Brave Combat Federation in giving South Korea and East Asia that exposure that they deserve. I mean, let's talk about the athletes out there that we're seeing come up through the ranks.
True, definitely. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I'm just thinking about that fight, and there's so much you could talk about. So I was in the cage before getting the judges' scorecards into the cage. I was just standing there and I was thinking, it's a beautiful fight in the sense that the fight could have ended any time. Every time Roman Bogatov stood up, it was like a shark coming into the land, And then the moment you go back to the water, and it's all the energy. And I just saw you wobbling and felt like you can't even walk. And then the moment you get him down, you keep him down, you have the grip and you're holding on to him. Like, where did that energy come from? Why don't you have that energy when you stand up? And on the other hand, you're taking him not stopping. He's constantly working, submission, all the attempts, the hip movements, rolling, and everything they can think of, a guy scrambling, that was the art of scrambling. And so when they were standing up, I was like, that's it. Taking Kim is going to knock him out. And there was a point where he sat back, and then he went to the punch, and then he got that single leg again. I was like, crazy. So he could have finished the fight any time.
When you speak to the issue of energy, I think a very important point to raise is speaking to Roman Bogatov, he had contracted COVID, I think 5 or 6 weeks out from the fight, wasn't able to train for a month. Now let that set in. How incredible was that, and that performance in the context of going into the fight essentially at a deficit, but still coming back to what we were saying about that warrior heart, that warrior mentality. Full camp behind him. He could hold on to the belt for a very long time, but I would not be mad at seeing a rematch.
Could be an incredible rematch.
Yeah, looks like a good rematch.
And both men are incredibly strong, but their chin as well, unbelievable. Hit with literal jackhammers, sledgehammers, and they just kept coming back.
It was a good picture with him with the title, and the face he had was just went through a war. You could actually see that in the face, and the title says there's a lot of meaning for that picture that they had when he was holding the title. No, it's crazy, but it was a crazy week actually. We're looking at how impressed were you with Brad Katona? I mean, unbelievable.
That performance was the best of his career. Unequivocally, I would say that is the best performance of his career. Speaking to him afterwards, he says that is the closest he has been able to replicate what he does in the gym. He was waiting for that moment to break through, that moment to show. We all know what a capable fighter he is. He's an incredible fighter, but that's the best he's looked. His hands, his shot selection, his level changes. I thought he looked absolutely incredible. And again, the big question now is defeating someone like Gamzat Magomedov. That in and of itself is huge. His work inside the clinch was exemplary. Everything he did. The body shots, and then rolling up to the head. Gamzat Magomedov has a chin made of concrete because he was hit clean a number of times. But again, a fantastic performance by Katona and a fantastic learning opportunity for Gamzat Magomedov.
No, definitely true. I mean, that weight class is crazy, right? Like if you think about the bantamweight division, I mean, anyone fighting anyone, it makes sense, I mean, if you're looking at guys like, who was that?
It's a stacked division.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
the top 5.
It's
unbelievable.
It's top of the food chain. I mean, to have the split decision Brad had with Hamza Kohiji, and then you have Gamzat. I mean, Gamzat is a guy who's always had this thing, right? Like, because of his amateur career and how well he did at the amateur career, and there was so much the training team of KHK. I mean, you're talking about when you have Dagestani wrestlers come and tell you that this guy's got one of the strongest grip, it's saying a lot, you know. So,
yes.
So
that's even an understatement coming from them, right?
exactly, you know. So that's Gamzat, right? One of the best grapplers. I mean, but then he got into the professional level, and he's been performing the same way. And then you're looking at him, and you're like, okay, you can't give him an 0-0 guy for all the efforts that he has put in at the amateur level, and then you give him a fighter who's 3-0 or 2-0, and you try to get those level up so it doesn't become a mismatch, because you know his background, and then he shows up and he's like, no, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, and you're like, no, there's something going on crazy. I mean, the Machaev fight and with Gamzat, like he was like around the world, he was a favorite, you know. So, and then Gamzat goes and knocks him out, you know. So, and that's Gamzat, you know. So he's gonna go back and he's gonna come back as a different animal for sure, right? And then Hamza, we've seen him improving every fight after fight after fight. He keeps constantly getting improved. But then you're talking about Nkosi coming up right now, you know. Yeah. And funny how to see Shorty Torres in the bantamweight division. I mean, that's gonna be really. It's crazy, you know. I mean, he maybe at least for this event, he might not be the only shorty in the Brave 65. We got a shorter person coming in, you know.
Whoever do you mean?
Hasbulla.
Hasbulla, the one and only.
Yeah.
It'll be incredible to have him here.
I think Shorty's going to be a little jealous.
Yeah, the bantamweight division at the minute for me is so exciting. As you say, with the inclusion of Shorty Torres, who I think right now at this stage of his career, at 30 years old, bantamweight is a better fit. I think there's going to be less focus necessarily on making that flyweight limit. Yeah. I think he's going to have more energy. He's going to be quicker. He's going to be less focused on trying to make that weight and more focused on developing his skill set. I think that's going to be a positive for him. But he has a very, very interesting fight. You know, this maybe not necessarily known to the international mixed martial arts community. Izzadine El Dabraoui is a fantastic fighter, and this isn't a gimme fight at all for Shorty. This isn't a welcome to a new division, let's get you a win and see how we go. This is a tight test for him, an incredibly tight test. Izzadine is 13-2. He has a win over Hamza Kohiji back from 2016. Which I think is another real interesting wrinkle to the dynamic we have in the bantamweight division.
And don't forget, Shorty's been here several times before, but this time he came up very early to KHK Team Bahrain and has been training with the guys daily. He looks ready, focused, confident as well, and he's a true pleasure to watch in the cage. Like Brad Katona, Shorty Torres is a perfect representation of our sport.
Right.
Class act all the way, someone that people want to emulate, look up to. I can't say enough great things about him.
So just a question here. I mean, all right. So if a fighter who was a flyweight, most of the bantamweight, like you said, he doesn't have to worry about his weight cut or any of those things. But on the other hand, you're fighting Izzadine, who's a featherweight moving down to bantamweight, which means he might be cutting a little more. Maybe he might be taller, longer, stronger to a guy who's at a lower weight class. You know, so. Which do you think you give more advantage? Of course, the skills and everything comes in for sure, you know, but when it comes to weight classes and someone moving up weight to a bantamweight compared to a guy who's coming from featherweight to bantamweight, if you just look and you don't know who's Shorty, you don't know who's Izzadine, and you see that story about one guy, there's a fight happening, flyweight moving to bantamweight, and a featherweight moving to bantamweight and meeting at bantamweight, who do you give more advantage to?
There are so many interesting variables therein. The guy moving up from flyweight to bantamweight doesn't have as much weight to cut. He may be going in there quicker. He may be going in there a little bit more settled, less focused on the weight cut, which, as we all know in professional fighting, can become a horrible preoccupation, something that messes with the mind more than the actual fight. That's why it's called the fight before the fight. The guy coming down from featherweight to bantamweight, now the interesting variable there is how easily will he make the weight? How much does he become preoccupied by the weight cut? And also, how well does he rehydrate afterwards? That's another interesting fact for me. I just think this has all the fixings of what can be a really interesting fight. As we say, the variables for Shorty, there are positives, there are negatives. For Izzadine, there are positives, there are negatives. But what it will come down to is who performs better on the night.
And then you're talking about a Mexican-style boxer in Shorty Torres, right? He walks in, chin down. Yeah, 100%. 100%. But he loves to go in, walk in, and throw those punches. And then you're always talking about Azzuddin, who's can keep that distance, technical striker, you know. And then you have Shorty Torres, who's going to walk in with his chin down and throw some punches, you know. Definitely has good head movements and scary power in the punches. So that's, I think it's an interesting matchup in the sense that when it comes to striking, I feel I give a slight advantage to Azzuddin. When it comes to wrestling, definitely Shorty Torres. So, but what do you think? Like, you think Shorty's going to walk in and strike? Because Shorty's not one of those Dagestani wrestlers who's going in to take down, you know. He's going in to fight, you know. He fights and he sees what happens and he feels the fight, he feels the opponent, and he goes with the flow. So, I don't know. For me, I feel like it's going to be a little bit risky to spend more time standing up with Azzuddin.
I have to add, too, with Shorty, admittedly so by himself, the key is that if he can start the fight at a good pace and not take it slowly to get into the fight, and by second round he turns on the jets. He's got to start earlier this time, and he says that himself. I think that's one of the huge keys to victory for him.
There's an old saying in boxing that champions only like it better when it hurts. Yep. They like the sport better when they get hurt. That's the kind of human being they are.
And he wakes up when he's hit.
He wakes up, and that's who Shorty Torres is. He likes what's going on better when it hurts. But my opinion, that is not to his advantage. I think he gets hit too much too early. Somebody coming down from featherweight with those kind of skills, you don't want to enjoy that guy hitting you and use that to fire you up. But there's a larger trend now in mixed martial arts. It used to be originally 13-week camps, got down to 8, 6. Now some will do 4-week camps. But people are starting to realize ballooning your weight up and then having a camp and sucking down, ballooning up, it's not that good. So when Shorty Torres moved to KHK MMA for a long, long camp, but really he's been training for a long, long time, it really, really made me happy. I don't think he's going to have to suck down a whole ton of weight for this one because he's been in camp for so long, he's been training for so long. But Eldar Eldarov, I always talk about John Kavanaugh, the genius. Eldar Eldarov, the genius, I think is going to sit him down, put him on his big knee, and just explain to him, no more liking it better when it hurts. No more getting into the fight in the second round after you bink, 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 bink to the head 20 times. And I think we're going to see a very, very different Shorty Torres this fight.
And Azzuddin Haq has grown since he fought with Shorty. Like you said, they both have gone 8-2 since then, and completely different fighters.
Hamza. Yeah.
With Hamza, I said.
I mean,
there's an interesting storyline there.
No, you can't write it. You can't write the story. I mean, like, it's like, you know, it's like you meet a girl in high school, and then years pass, and then finally you end up in a new country, and then you're going to work, and then you're meeting the girl there. You know, that's the kind of story it is. I mean, literally, you can't make that up. I mean, you could make it in a movie, but you can't write that script in real life, you know. And believe me, a lot of people say, you know what, Shahid, I know what you're doing here. And I'm like, I swear to God, I had no idea. We didn't plan it. Nothing of that was the plan. Because if you look at the fight that happened in 2016, I don't know if I'm right, if it was 2016, but this was, so at that time, we always say that was the golden era for Arab MMA, because we were all, it was a community trying to build MMA in the region, you know, and we're all fighters, and that was a beautiful time, one of those olden times of when MMA started, you know, where nobody really cared about us, and the mainstream media didn't care about us. But then why were this bunch of people still doing it? Because of love and passion for it, you know, knowing that when you do something and know that there's no future for this, and you still do it, I mean, that's when you know that you really love love what you're doing, you know, and that's where Arab MMA was at that time. And we've had all this special athletes like Fakhruddin, like Jarrah Selawi, like Hashim Arkhaga, a lot of guys that came up, Abdul Karim Salwadi, all these boys, you know, special individuals that was coming up at that time. And Hamza Khoja and Azzuddin was one of those guys coming up at that time, right? And then, but at that time it was different because when the fight happened, it was not like Hamza Kohiji was doing recovery and sleep coaching, or going through 3-4 nutrition coaches, 6-7 mixed martial art coaches from wrestling to jiu-jitsu and striking. None of that stuff. It was just train, prepare. We got to fight. Let's go. I was that time, and then I remember that because we were traveling from Bahrain to Jordan for that fight, and his opponent pulled out. It was a couple of days before, and then. His opponent called later on after the fight and said that, listen, I pulled out almost 3 to 4 weeks ago, but nobody informed you, and imagine he had to call Hamza and say that I don't want you to feel like I was the reason you had to go through that situation. I need to clarify it. I feel guilty because I know I gave a heads up to them. And they called Hamza and they said that 2 days before the fight that the fight is pulled out, and you have a new opponent, few options, and then you fight with a guy who's, I don't know, they were supposed to fight. I think I could be completely wrong here. I think it was featherweight they were supposed to fight, but then the fight happened somewhere to catchweight or lightweight or between that, That's why I always thought Azedin was a lightweight fighter, but then later on I started watching his fights and I realized that he's a featherweight fighter. So that's what the story was, and then they fought, and it was nothing to do with the weight or any of those. That was a fight where one guy goes for the takedown, the other guy was trying to throw a knee, and they both somehow thought the same thing to do at the same time. And then they, how long was the fight? That was what?
24 seconds.
24 seconds? So there you go. So it was nothing to do with the weight. It was nothing to do with the short notice. It was just that two guys thought of doing something at the same time, and this guy threw a knee. It was not like he saw the takedown coming, or he wanted to get a right time to go for a takedown. It was just a knee and a takedown at the same time, and that was it, and that was the end of the fight. Hamza got knocked out, and there you go. The fight is done, and after that fight, they both went their separate paths. Right. Life changed, the industry of mixed martial art in the region changed. Everything just kept becoming a different level. And then you saw those boys who were Fakhruddin, Abdul Karim Salwadis, and Jarrahs, and all these guys who were the golden boys of that old school MMA of Middle East, let's say. And they came into Brave and got the global platform, and they're all grown up, and they've actually reached their potential of being the best in the world, So. But one of the guys who didn't get that opportunity from that golden era is Izzeddin Darbani. He was left out. I mean, for some reason or somehow, he was not in the picture of the top level athletes that was signed into Brave Combat Federation. He wasn't there at that time. So you see everybody else from that golden era got their opportunity and became where they are. Life changed, you moved on, you don't care about the bully in the school, now you're a CEO at a company, so things have changed. Everybody's reached to the heights of where they are, right? All the fighters. And then, fast forward, here we are, and we're sitting down and we're talking about who are the next big fighters in the Middle East, who are doing the good job. So we were doing the scouting program, and then the director of our athlete relations, Sam, he came in and he was like, what about this guy? And I was looking at him, I was like, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the records and everything else, and we're watching the fights, and we were going through, he won he's a 2 promotion champion in the Middle East, So all that career, I'm like, yeah, I think it's time, I think he needs that opportunity, and he needs to get that platform that all of his colleagues got, and he's the one left out, So he's coming in, and that was the only intention we had, that he needs to get that opportunity from the left out person from the golden era of mixed martial art in the Middle East. It's his time now. So Izzeddin, for him, it's my time now to showcase to the rest of the world that I'm the next big or best fighter globally from Middle East, and he wants to showcase that. So he came in, and then and I was like, okay, let's talk about when do we match him, who's he going to fight next, let's look at the options, let's have this meeting. Then Sam comes in and says, yeah, let's talk about it. I'm like, look at the featherweight division. And he's like, no, it's bantamweight. I'm like, what? He decided to go bantamweight because when he's coming into Brave, he wants to fight the best fights, he wants to be at the top of the world, so he wants to be, professional at the highest level, so he wants to go to the weight class that's best for him, and to the weight class that he can perform the highest and think that he can be a champion. That was bantamweight division. It was not planned. Hamza happened to finish his career in the Middle Eastern promotions and came into Brave, and he decided gradually to go down to bantamweight, and then he decided, oh, I can't go to flyweight anymore, that's the best I can cut, so he decided to stay at bantamweight. And then Izzeddin never fought at bantamweight, and he's always been fighting at featherweight or higher than that weight class, and then comes into Brave and decides to go to bantamweight. So they happen to be in the same weight class, and we happen to make the event in Bahrain, where Izzuddin is fighting, and he can do his debut, and he's doing his debut with Shorty Toast in the co-main event, where the main event is Hamza Kohiji fighting Eduardo Mora. None of this was planned, believe me, trust me. I mean, it's hard to believe, but none of this was planned, and it just happened, and that's the main event and co-main event, and everybody in the MMA community in the Middle East is looking and saying, you know, we know what you're cooking, you know. I mean, and I'm like, you know what? It happened to be. Am I excited? 100%. Am I looking forward to that rematch? 100%. I mean, and I don't think those two fighters are not thinking about it. They're thinking about it right now. And I also think they might be thinking about it more than their current fight as well. Right. You know, just my opinion, could be wrong, because that's how important that fight is for Middle East and how big that fight is going to be for Middle East, because these two guys have showcased that they have the talent, they have the skills, and they have grown and achieved what they have achieved in mixed martial art at bantamweight division, at their divisions, and now they're coming back and fighting, and you know, to be the best and brave at that weight class. I mean, it's crazy.